Co-anchor Jane Dutton is at the Zone in Rosebank as part of our special focus on retail and business in South Africa. Jane, good morning to you. So it's no secret that our country's economy is under serious pressure and business has got to do better in order to absorb people into jobs.
I mean, shocking to hear, Corley, that our business confidence is at a 20-year low. Consumer confidence in the industry, well, it's got up just a little bit, but really not enough to put that money back in the economy to kickstart it as we sort of hang over the fiscal cliff that seems to be looming ever closer. And it's, you can understand why. We've seen anarchy on the streets and what sometimes looks like war. Well, I've got the CEO of Business Confidence South Africa with me, Busiwe Mavuso. We've had these disturbing pictures of demonstrations on the street at a time of the World Economic Forum. What has been the economic fallout from that?
Yeah, so the big discussion actually at West Africa, where the demonstration started, right on the first day of West Africa, was precisely a concern and a condemnation of what was actually happening. And I think we are placing a lot of responsibility, on the lack of leadership, right? We're saying that political will is actually going to have to come in strongly in as far as condemning these violence attacks is concerned. But I think I like what the president has done. Jane, you would know that this morning he has sent the investment envoys to the rest of the continent to actually, if nothing else, reassure the rest of the continent, in terms of South Africa's commitment in continuing to work with the rest of Africa. But I think we're also facing...
Do we go there in a position of power? I mean, do we have any leverage at all, or is it more a case of going there with our begging bowl?
I think it is a question of trying to reassure, our African sister countries, of our continued commitment to continue to work on the African Renaissance, on the African agenda, to build our economies together. As the most advanced economy, in the continent, we have a responsibility, to actually be reaching out. And it's precisely because, these violence attacks, of other African nationals have started here in South Africa. We actually do have an obligation to actually be going out and reaching out to them so that it can really be seen that from a political perspective, we have not waved, from the broader African, agenda and focus. So I think it is actually really a brilliant move, and I think it's going to augur well. But I think,
No, I was going to say, today we hear about the dramatic increase in oil and Brent crude prices. Yeah. How will that be absorbed here?
What we're facing from an economic perspective, we are just facing subdued growth, and it's a global phenomenon, Jane, right? And I think as a country, as a continent, I think we are just feeling the remnants of that, right? Because as you know, South Africa doesn't really control the oil prices, but it's really an after effect, of the shocks that are happening the world around. You, for instance, the US and the US and China trade wars are a big impact in the South African economy. The Brexit, is a big impact on that because Europe is a big trading partner of South Africa.
So geopolitical factors, jumping in, obviously have a dramatic impact on every country
absolutely
at the moment. But
absolutely.
South Africa, it's exacerbated by the crime that we see here. The gender-based violence, which is horrific. And we know that there's a call for companies on the stock market, the JSE, to be taxed 2% of their profits. Yeah. Does that sort of thing attract investment, or is it something that would put a dampener on bringing people in?
I think it is how we respond to it that is actually going to be a determining factor. And I think actually the fact that the demonstrations on Friday were peaceful and we as business actually came out, welcoming the protesters and saying this, we are willing to actually sit down and have a conversation. Nikki and myself are actually having a conversation on Friday with the civil society groupings that marched to the JSE to actually try and find each other, to say what are some of the concerns that are being brought on the table. Because if the concern is that corporate South Africa is not coming on board in the way that it should, then we need to understand how. Because the CSI, of a lot of private sector companies is going to such initiatives. Yes. So if that is not enough, then we'd like to be made to understand what more can corporate South Africa be doing. But over and above that, Jane, you would know that we have reached out to the National Prosecuting Authority, for instance, as the corporate South Africa, to say that how do we strengthen you as a unit? How do we ensure that what is coming out of the Zondo commissions can actually be used, and you can start getting litigation deviation or two out of that, because I think that is what is going to restore confidence. It's all good and well that we have set up these commissions, but the consequence management is going to have to come out. I like the reaction, for instance, of the Minister of Police, Minister Pigicale, and the security cluster, who have actually come out very strongly, to say that something is going to have to be done. So there's definitely gaps in terms of how things are going, but we are not lame ducks and we are not sitting and watching, as a country.
Yeah.
I think leadership has really risen up, from a political perspective and from a business perspective. And we're actually trying to find a way as the two constituencies to say that how to work together, because we understand that the responsibility of the economy is actually the responsibility of both government and business.
Okay,
It's
and
not a
clearly
government problem.
This
It is a
they've
business
got to work
problem as
hand in
well.
hand. Thank you very much
They
for that.
do, absolutely.
Taking the holistic approach. Now, the zone is one of the few malls that has invested heavily in its development, and we're going to be talking about the sort of impact that's going to have, not only in Johannesburg, but on other malls and the future of super malls in the next hour.